Hello, friends, and welcome to Shrinking Podcast, where we shrink those mountains in our life. Thank you guys for joining me today. I am your host, Erin Shrinking, and friends, I am so excited to bring today's podcast to you, mainly because I'm not involved in it at all. But I'm so excited because we're in a series right now called Seasons, and we couldn't get through the series without addressing some of the hardest seasons we can go through in our life, and those are seasons that maybe we're dealing with hormonal issues, right? We might be struggling with our hormones, PCOS, menopause, all those things, right? So we had dietitian Allie sit down with someone who specializes in hormones and eating for your hormones and helping with PCOS and all of those amazing things to bring you guys this amazing session on our podcast. Hopefully you'll be able to pick some really good nuggets out of it, some tips and tricks, right? And if you have any questions at all, you can reach us at www.shrinkingtribe.com for any kind of help or support that you need. So friends, I am so excited to introduce today's segment with you. Thank you so much, Dietitian Lindsay and Dietitian Allie, for bringing this education to us to the podcast. So guys, I hope you enjoy and have a wonderful day.
Shrinking Tribe, thank you so much for being here on the Shrinking Tribe podcast. I am Allie, your official Shrinking Tribe podcast dietitian, and with me today I have one of my favorite dietitians and one of the best in the biz, my good friend Lindsay Nelson. So what Lindsay does is she is an expert on PCOS and hormone imbalances, and she has her own practice here in Lee Summit, Missouri, and I'm so excited to have her on. We're going to have her answer your guys' biggest questions when it comes to hormone balance and PCOS and all of that fun stuff. But before we get to that, Lindsay, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got kind of where you are at today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. So I've been a dietitian for, I think, 11 years now. And a few years ago, well, I guess it's been like 8 years ago, my husband and I were ready. Yeah, it does. We were ready to start a family. But we had fertility problems, couldn't get pregnant, but it turns out I had PCOS, which I didn't know because I had always just been put on birth control from a young age to help, quote unquote, like regulate my hormones. So that was kind of covered up until it was time to start a family. So I found out I had PCOS and
So Lindsay, for those that don't know, what is PCOS?
So PCOS is a really common endocrine disorder. It affects about like 10 to 20% of women, which is pretty high. Basically it's just a hormone imbalance condition. And a lot of times there's insulin resistance, there's high testosterone. So most women with PCOS have irregular periods or lack of periods, weight gain, trouble losing weight, blood sugar problems, high cholesterol, lots of metabolic stuff going on with PCOS.
Interesting. Okay, so you didn't even know that you had this until you were trying to have a family and it wasn't working very well, I'm guessing.
Right. So I got prescribed some medications for fertility and I took them for maybe like a month, but I was having some side effects. I'm like, you know what? I am a dietitian. Like I can dig into the research and figure out more about PCOS because it's not something that we were really taught about that much besides just surface level, like in school. So I did just a ton of my own research and just learning more about the condition and learning how to manage it naturally. And once I learned all those things and I put it into practice, I was able to get pregnant naturally. In fact, I got pregnant 3 times, or I had 3 babies in 3.5 years. So that's a testament to like how you really can manage your PCOS naturally without having to go on fertility medication or having to be on birth control or metformin. Like there's so much we can do with diet and lifestyle and supplements to manage the condition.
That is so awesome. And I remember whenever you were about to have your third, that you said that you had been praying whether or not you should have a third. And then you woke up the next morning and were like, oh, I'm pregnant.
Yes, it was so funny. I like prayed I was in yoga class and I was praying during yoga. I'm like, God, if you want us to have a third, like, please give me a very clear sign. And the next morning I woke up and I felt nauseous and I'm like, is this the sign? And I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. So it was meant to
that
be.
is that is also like a testament to you can really manage this without medication and do it on your own naturally.
Right.
That is
100%.
that is the coolest. So you kind of talked a little bit about this, but what are kind of some like signs and symptoms for people who don't know that they might have PCOS?
So the main sign is looking at your period and if you're having those super irregular or even like a lack of a period. So some women like just don't have periods at all with PCOS, or maybe they only have one or two a year. So that's the biggest sign.
Mm.
Other signs would be hirsutism, which is like the extra hair growth on women. So like the coarse hair on your chin, your neck, above your lip, um, thinning of the hair like on top of your head. So alopecia, the male pattern baldness, that's
Mm.
another big sign. Acne is a big sign. Um, Weight gain, trouble losing weight, irritability, anxiety. Those are all the most common signs of PCOS.
Those are horrible side effects.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, so if you're on birth control like you were, would you not have any of these side effects or would you have some?
You might have some. It's the symptoms are usually better controlled when on birth control. Well, they're not really controlled, but they're covered up with birth control. Um, so when someone has been on birth control, like a lot of women go in when they're 18 or 19 and they say like, "Hey doctor, I haven't had a period. What do I do?" And they say, "Oh, just get on birth control so you start having normal periods." But a lot of times, so that's when like PCOS typically gets covered up because
Mhm.
they're just given birth control, so they start having regular periods. So it's never known why they're having irregular periods to begin with. So a lot of times it's not really discovered until somebody gets off of birth control.
Interesting. And then why does it get discovered then whenever does everyone with PCOS have problems with fertility?
Not everyone. And sometimes, like even women who have irregular periods, they might still get pregnant pretty easily. But like if you're only having periods even like 6 months out of the year, then that only gives you six chances to get pregnant throughout the year versus 12. So it usually just takes longer when you have PCOS because, of course, when you're not ovulating, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. That said, though, not everyone with PCOS has irregular periods. Some women do still have regular periods, but they might have the other signs and symptoms of PCOS.
Interesting. So did you or do people get like is there like blood work or different testing or do they kind of just look at the symptoms and assume?
You have to do some diagnostic testing in order to get diagnosed with PCOS. So to get diagnosed, you have to have two out of the three diagnostic criteria. You have to have either lack of or irregular periods, cysts on ovaries, or elevated androgens, which are those male sex hormones like testosterone. So two out of those three things can diagnose you with PCOS.
Interesting. And then once a physician has diagnosed you, is their typical routine like here's birth control, get on that? Or what is their typical course of action?
So the most common protocol for PCOS in conventional medicine is birth control, unless of course somebody's trying to get pregnant. But usually birth control is what they put women on to cover up those symptoms and yeah, just kind of it helps to manage those symptoms without getting down to the root cause. But they usually prescribe birth control, metformin, and a lot of times they'll also tell women to lose weight if they are in like the overweight category. But those are the top three things that usually happen. when someone's diagnosed with PCOS.
Interesting. So then from your standpoint and all the research that you have done, what are the things naturally more food related that you can do to help manage your PCOS?
So I definitely practice from like a comprehensive, holistic viewpoint when it comes to managing
Love
PCOS.
it.
And of course, like food and nutrition is the foundation of that. So that's the main thing I always like to focus on with my clients first is getting their food in order. And there's not one specific diet that I recommend for PCOS. It's more about just eating a nutrient dense whole foods diet. So basically eating foods that come from the earth that bring us the nutrients and the minerals, the antioxidants that we are really meant to eat to thrive and survive. That's the main thing is just nourishing those nutrient stores in our body. But then also learning how to balance our blood sugars with how we eat and learning to balance out those macronutrients at every meal is super important since blood sugar regulation and insulin resistance are going to be, well, getting those things under control. So getting your blood sugar and insulin under control is going to be vital for PCOS since that's one of the underlying drivers. So getting that blood sugar regulated throughout the day, getting that fasting insulin down,
Hmm.
which can be done just by learning how to balance out your carbs, your protein, your fat at every meal. That's going to make a really big difference with inflammation and even hormone balance too.
That's so cool. So that's food. You said you make a more holistic approach. Are there other things that you can do besides food that kind of help with that balancing of blood sugar and things like that?
Yes, definitely. So I like to talk to my clients about nutrition, but also supplements. So all my clients do get a supplement protocol since that can make a big difference with PCOS, but also movement. So I always encourage my clients to try to get some movement in after every meal, even if it is
Oh,
just 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That's going to help a lot with blood sugar regulation. I focus a lot on stress since elevated cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is going to cause a lot of hormone imbalance. I focus on sleep, which also affects stress. That's going to help too with our hormones. Even things like endocrine disruptors, so avoiding endocrine disrupting chemicals, makes a big difference on
mm.
how our hormones work in our body. Um, so it's really a whole lifestyle approach. It's not just what you're eating, but really everything in your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. So if someone is watching this and they are really, really struggling, what would you say was like your top three tips that they can start like this week potentially?
Um, Good question. So I would say the first thing is to start meal planning just to help you be like more mindful of what you're eating and without a plan, like it's going to be hard to really change your nutrition and what you're eating. So being mindful of what you're going to be putting in your body throughout the week by sitting down once a week and writing out your meals is super helpful.
Hmm.
Um, Number two, I would say get outside every day and go for a walk in nature because that's one of the most therapeutic things that you can do for PCOS, but not just PCOS, just for your hormones and just overall health, just getting outside and getting movement in, ideally in nature, so that you're also reducing anxiety levels and improving your mood. And
It's
that's going to
crazy
help
what
with.
that will do. Like, especially with the spring just coming, I'm like, oh, I feel like a different person. I think everybody like feels that too.
Exactly. It just does so much, like not just for PCOS, but every single human being, like getting outside and getting nature, getting vitamin D from the sun, like it's going to change so much for your health. It brings down those cortisol levels, brings down inflammation.
Yeah,
So that would be the
so,
second
so
thing.
good.
The third thing I would say would be just to focus on your sleep. Since
Mm.
sleep is also going to impact that cortisol and is going to reduce inflammation, it's going to help with blood sugar. Um, so those would be my top three things.
Those are so good. So with sleep, I always try to tell the tribe, I've got this 3-2-1 rule that I'm still working on in my life as well. But I tell them, try to stop eating 3 hours before bed, try to stop drinking 2 hours before bed, and stop watching screens 1 hour before bed. Do you have any other like good sleep tips? Because I know a lot of us struggle with that.
Yeah, I like those a lot, the ones that you just said. I would say also, it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about with getting outside, but getting
Oh,
sunlight before
yes.
noon. So, like getting morning exposure to sunlight is going to help boost natural melatonin production. So that's another really good tip for sleep.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know that it was better before noon. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it
So,
helps with like daytime energy. So it helps with daytime energy, then it helps with sleeping better at nighttime.
ooh, I love that. Cool. So, then kind of PCOS is a type like PCOS happens because of your hormones being unbalanced, correct? Like
Yes,
you're
so
more
like
estrogen dominant.
not necessarily. So PCOS, like anyone who has PCOS has the genetic predisposition for it. Um, so it's not really something that you can control, and not just from a hormone imbalance. It's a genetic predisposition. So certain things in your life can kind of turn that key to make that um, tendency a reality, and it can turn into full blown PCOS. Um, but it's not always, sometimes it can be because of estrogen, or estrogen dominance can be part of PCOS, but not always. Um, Sometimes you can still have low estrogen with PCOS. Most of the time, progesterone is what's really low with PCOS.
Hmm.
So there's usually an imbalance with estrogen and progesterone. So even if estrogen isn't super high, a lot of times progesterone is low because we aren't ovulating. So when you're not ovulating regularly, you're not going to have progesterone production, since ovulation is what helps to make progesterone. And then also that high testosterone is usually really common with PCOS. So yeah, usually it's low progesterone, high testosterone, and then estrogen kind of depends on the person. Sometimes it is really low, sometimes it's really high.
Interesting. So, is it possible to have a hormonal imbalance but not have PCOS?
Yes, definitely. So like uh endometriosis, for example, that's another hormone imbalance condition, and that's a condition of estrogen dominance, super high estrogen that causes fibroids and heavy bleeding and really bad menstrual cramps and menstrual migraines. There are lots of other hormone imbalances that are not PCOS.
Ah, so how do you know if you might have a hormonal imbalance?
So you can look first at your symptoms. Some of them have already mentioned, but other ones would be like tender breast, mood swings, menstrual migraines, brain fog, bone loss, irritability, headaches, depression, anxiety, low libido, insomnia. I mean, there are so many issues that hormone imbalances can create. So if you feel like you have a lot of those, it might be good to ask your doctor about getting some of your hormones checked. So you can do like a blood test at the doctor. You do want to make sure that you're getting like some of those hormone tests you want to do on a certain day of your cycle. So like progesterone, for example, you want to get that tested about halfway through your luteal phase, which is the phase between ovulation and your period starting to really catch progesterone at its peak. So you'll want to ask your doctor about that too, because you might have to go in on different days, depending on
Mm.
like what hormones you're getting checked. But my favorite way to check hormones is the Dutch test, which is a functional medicine test that I like to do with my clients. So it's just a very comprehensive hormone test. It actually uses dried urine samples.
Oh,
But
nice. You
that's
don't have to go and get blood drawn. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It's all done at home, and it's very comprehensive because it looks at lots of different hormones, and it also looks at different organic acids. So it looks at cortisol, it looks at your neurotransmitters. So it's a really good comprehensive test to really see what's going on in your hormone environment.
That's awesome. How much does that test run about?
It's usually around like $500 to get that done.
Hmm.
Um, or that's what I charge my clients when I'm doing the hormone tests. So that includes like the tests and also like going over the results and putting together a protocol. So it's not one that's covered by insurance, but it's definitely a good tool to get to the bottom of what's going on with your hormones.
Absolutely. That's really, really cool. If someone thinks that they do have a hormonal imbalance, I'm guessing you would suggest that they do the test. Then after the test, what kind of things do you do to make sure their hormones are balanced?
So it'll kind of depend on what the results show, but when we do have really good results, like the Dutch test, really good data to go off of, that helps us to really put together a super specific protocol for that person. Um, so when I'm doing a protocol for somebody, I'll use both supplements and like specific foods and lifestyle changes. So like if we see that cortisol is super high, of course, we're going to focus on stress reduction and sleep. That test will also show like if melatonin production is low or not. So maybe we
Ooh,
need to
cool.
supplement with melatonin. If somebody has super low progesterone, I might recommend a supplement like Vitex to get that progesterone up. So it's definitely very specific, just depending on what that person's results show. But if someone doesn't have any actual data to go off of, we can also go based off of their symptoms, and try to make recommendations based on, yeah, just the symptoms if we don't have the actual data to go off of.
Yeah, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be more like balancing those blood sugars again and making sure that you have the macros well balanced at each meal and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. That is so cool. So, if someone thinks that they've got PCOS or knows that they have PCOS or hormone imbalances, and they are on kind of a weight loss journey, you said a lot of people with PCOS tend to have weight gain just because of the disease state. What can kind of you expect as far as weight loss? You said, I think you mentioned that it's a lot harder.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just eating less and moving more, which can be super frustrating, especially when you go to the doctor and you're like, help, I have all these like symptoms and I can't lose weight. And the doctor's like, well, you're eating too much or you're not exercising enough. But that can be really frustrating to hear when someone's already been trying so hard and the scale's not moving. So those hormone imbalances and insulin resistance especially can make it super difficult to lose weight. So
Sure.
it really depends on the person. Like for some people, once they do like figure out the appropriate amount of calories to eat and the appropriate amount of macronutrients at each meal and they start moving their body, for some people it does start coming off pretty quickly, but not for everyone.
Mm.
So there's not really like um an exact like number or like to expect for weight loss since it does vary based on the person. But if someone is eating the appropriate amount of calories and really nourishing their body really well and moving their body and getting enough sleep, but still nothing's happening, maybe there's still a deeper issue going on. Maybe there's a gut imbalance, which we
Mm.
know can increase inflammation, which makes weight loss really difficult. Maybe they have a sluggish metabolism or a sluggish thyroid. Um, so getting to the root cause can be really helpful to figure out why maybe somebody's not losing weight if they're not. Um, so yeah, long story short, it kind of depends on the person.
I love it. And that is so true. Like everyone is so unique and so different. I know like a lot of people in the tribe will be like, the scale just isn't moving for me. And then for some people, it's just falling off. And it's really, you got to take that individual approach. And I don't know kind of what you've experienced too, but I think that a lot of people get really frustrated if it doesn't come off at first, but that's not a typical lifespan for someone. I think most people, it's going to take a couple months of really changing the way that you're living before you see any results. Do you kind of see that it takes people with hormonal imbalances, PCOS, just a little bit longer to get where they want to get?
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you've had like chronic stress for years, changing what you're eating and maybe lowering stress for just a month isn't going to reverse all of that. So it definitely takes time and consistency of doing these changes and really nourishing your body and taking time to relax and sleep and lower those stress levels. It can definitely take time to see the biggest results after making those changes. So, yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, for sure. So if you are, or if you know that a patient is kind of coming up on that perimenopause or menopausal stage, how would you suggest that they kind of tweak their diet if they've always had hormonal issues and now they're getting into that menopause stage?
So there's not a whole lot they have to change diet wise if they're already eating like that nutrient dense whole foods diet. So eating those real foods and balancing out those macros at their meals. But there are some specific things that they can do to help that transition. So, like, one common thing is having hot flashes. So, one thing you can do to support healthy estrogen levels is to consume 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed every single day.
Mm, mm.
And that can help a lot with hot flashes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so interesting. Is it like the omega 3s, or is there something else in flax seeds that makes that happen? Do you know?
so, flaxseed is a phytoestrogen. So, it mimics estrogen, but it can help um, help the body basically balance out estrogen. So it just supports healthy estrogen levels, which in like perimenopause and menopause, estrogen is declining. So adding
Mhm.
in that flaxseed daily can really help with the hot flashes, which is really cool. And
Yeah.
then alcohol is another thing to during perimenopause to try to like cut out completely because it can
Mhm.
make hot flashes a lot worse. Red wine especially can make hot flashes worse, which usually we say like red wine's one of the healthiest alcohols because you're getting all those heart healthy antioxidants,
Antioxidants. Yeah.
but not in perimenopause. So skipping out on that during perimenopause. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, UTIs are like recurrent UTIs can be common in perimenopause. So, eating probiotic rich food, especially with the lactobacillus species, can be really helpful. So, just eating fermented foods like yogurt and kefir and sauerkraut that can help with those recurrent UTIs. Um, and then the last thing would be like mood changes. So, mood swings are pretty common in perimenopause. So, healthy fats and omega 3s can help a lot with mood changes and irritability. Also, getting adaptogens, which are herbs that help your body combat stress and mood changes, that can be helpful. And then again, going back to blood sugar balance, since we know that fluctuating blood sugars can definitely lead to a lot of irritability. So, um, always keeping that blood sugar in check is really important.
Adaptogens. Have you tried mushroom coffee? Because it's my new favorite. And I'm trying to get the people in the tribe to try it, but I don't think anyone's trying it with me.
I still haven't tried it, but I want to. What brand do you like?
It's called, I think, OM. I don't
Okay.
know. I get it at Sprouts. Yeah, and it's got like 17 different types of mushrooms in there. And I was like, okay, here we go. We're adaptogening it up.
That's so cool. What does it taste like though?
It tastes a little earthy, but it really tastes very similar to coffee, honestly. I mean, I still put the
Nice.
almond milk in there. I put some liquid stevia in there, but it doesn't taste that much different than coffee. So
It's
you're
awesome.
saying that if you're in perimenopause, you should get this mushroom coffee. That's what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm saying. You guys should try that. If you're in perimenopause, try this mushroom coffee and let us know how it is.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. So, Lindsay, That was the last big question from the tribe that I have. But you have an amazing program that you have curated for women who are struggling with PCOS and hormonal imbalances. Tell everyone about that and how they could get involved with that.
Yeah, so I offer a 3-month program called Confidence with PCOS. So it basically walks you through all the steps of learning to manage your PCOS. Since PCOS is a chronic condition, it's important to learn how to manage it since it's something that you will deal with the rest of your life. So learning how to manage it naturally so that you can have a good quality of life and have really good health as you age is really important. So it walks you through all those things I talked about. So your nutrition, meal planning, what supplements you might need, movement, stress, sleep, endocrine disruptors. It really walks you through that. I have both an individual program and I also have a group program, but it's either way, it's the same content, and it's all done virtually too.
So cool. Well, Linz, thanks so much for being on. I know I learned a ton because I had forgotten. Sorry, one more thing before we go is that you had mentioned like we don't get much schooling about this. I really did not get hardly any schooling about PCOS. I remember hearing about it for the first time when I was in clinical rotations, like after graduating college in the hospital. And I was like, what is this? So thank you for coming on and enlightening everyone because I think more women need to know how prevalent this is and that they can control it naturally. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for asking me to be on here. I had a good time chatting with you.
All right, friends, we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Thank you so much, Dietitian Allie and Dietitian Lindsay, for bringing that information to us and educating us on this topic. Oh my goodness, your brains mesh together. So good, so good. So if you guys ever have any questions, you can reach out to us at www.shrinkingtribe.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also like and subscribe to our channel because we'll be putting out more information every Friday to you guys. So have an amazing day, guys. And what if this time you didn't give up?